They called it a ceasefire, but Zelnara called it surrender. The skies of Velker Prime still burned with the echoes of orbital fire. Human fleets had pulled back, yes, but not before laying waste to everything she once called sacred. Her people didn't need peace now. They needed justice. The fields where her ancestors walked were craters. The great spires of Shulketh, once proud towers of Kael'tari learning and culture, were now molten bones buried in ash. Her sister's body was never found. Only fragments of her armor recovered from beneath a collapsed shelter where she had shielded younglings from a blast. The humans said it was collateral damage. The humans said it was regrettable. Zelnara remembered her sister's voice, quiet and calm, just before she left for the final evacuation post. "If I die, let vengeance be your light. Never trust them. Never." She obeyed. With a dagger carved from war steel, Zelnara sliced her palm and let the blood drip onto her chest plate. She whispered the ancestral vow, words older than any galactic treaty, and etched the oath into the alloy, Kael'thor Venshak, a binding promise. Until death, she would kill any human who crossed her path. No exceptions, no hesitation, no forgiveness. Weeks later, the Joint Galactic Coalition announced that Kael'tari leaders would participate in peace accords, trade routes, cultural exchanges, joint security pacts. Zelnara sneered. It was politics, weakness, packaged as diplomacy. When the Coalition summoned a military liaison from the Kael'tari to represent their species aboard a neutral orbital station, she volunteered. The ruling houses were hesitant, but her reputation silenced them. She was a war hero, a living blade. If peace was to be watched, they trusted her to keep a sharp eye and sharper claws. In truth, she accepted the position to get closer to Earth's allies. Peace stations, like Nexus Halo, were nothing but breeding grounds for manipulation. Zelnara would observe, record, and if necessary, dismantle alliances before they could turn into future threats. No one suspected her motives. No one saw the fire behind her mask. The Kael'tari vessel that carried her to Nexus Halo was a silent ghost among the stars. Zelnara stood alone at the viewport, arms folded behind her back, as the station grew larger in the distance. A sprawling wheel of light and metal, orbiting no world, anchored only by politics and tension. They said Nexus Halo was the crown jewel of post-war unity. She saw only vulnerability. Hundreds of species under one roof, pretending the last 5 years hadn't happened, pretending that bones weren't still buried under embers on 100 worlds. Humans, especially, walked the halls like victors, smiling, laughing, trading stories and technology as if the war had merely been a misunderstanding. They wore their medals with ease, as if they hadn't burned civilizations to earn them. She clenched her jaw. On the day she arrived, a Coalition protocol officer greeted her with a hollow speech about honor and diplomacy. Zelnara said nothing. She accepted the diplomatic badge and scanned the room, mentally noting the exits. No matter how many treaties were signed, her instincts were trained for war. She didn't trust smiles, least of all from humans. They assigned her quarters in the Kael'tari wing of the station. Spartan, functional, and far from the human sector. She preferred it that way. The less she heard their music and their laughter, the easier it was to remember the screams. The following morning, she received her first assignment. Coalition security had flagged suspicious energy signatures on Deck 9. An industrial level closed to civilians. Joint task force teams were being formed to investigate. She was to accompany a human liaison. She almost refused, but this was an opportunity. First-hand observation, closer contact, maybe a chance to gather intelligence or identify weaknesses. She accepted. She expected arrogance. She expected hostility. She did not expect Lieutenant Elias Monroe. When she entered the briefing chamber, he stood by the wall with his arms crossed, looking more like a mercenary than a diplomat. His eyes locked on hers with curiosity, not fear, not superiority, but calm appraisal. He nodded once. "Commander Zelnara," he said, "heard you're good with a plasma blade. Let's hope you don't need it today." She didn't respond. His record showed he'd served in ground combat units during the final Velker offensive, medals for valor, injuries, commendations. all meaningless. His people had raised their cities. Nothing would change that. As they walked to the lift, he filled the silence with casual talk. Nothing important. Observations. Station gossip. Even a joke about the station's food replicators. She ignored him. Not a fan of human company? He asked at one point, not unkindly. I find it best to keep things professional, she said. He nodded, accepting the wall she built. On the way to Deck 9, she reviewed the layout, narrow corridors, minimal lighting. Excellent for an ambush. She noted her escape paths. Monroe, to her annoyance, was humming some human melody under his breath, completely relaxed, overconfident, perhaps, or maybe just reckless. They reached the sealed blast door and began scanning for the energy anomalies reported. Zelnara's instincts prickled. Something was off. The energy pattern was real, but there was no trace of maintenance logs, no Coalition droids nearby. A setup? She kept one hand near her weapon. Monroe crouched by a panel and frowned. This isn't right. There's no authorization stamp. Someone bypassed standard security. She narrowed her eyes. A false cache. Or a trap. He tapped into the panel with a data tool, while she covered him, eyes scanning the corridor. His movements were efficient, practiced, not showy, not clumsy. That annoyed her more than it should have. Why are you really here? She asked, her voice low. He glanced up. I could ask the same. She didn't blink. Answer. He didn't flinch. Because I've seen what happens when peace fails. I'd rather it didn't. A hollow sentiment. Empty words. Still, there was something in his tone that didn't match the mask most humans wore. They identified the cache location behind a bulkhead and prepared to breach. Zelnara drew her blade. He readied a kinetic rifle. No words, just a shared glance of readiness. She hated it. How seamless it felt to move beside him. Like old instincts remembered a kind of trust she swore never to feel again. The cache, however, was no simple stockpile. The door behind them hissed. Then came the sound of boots. And then gunfire. Bullets tore into the corridor walls. Zelnara shoved Monroe down behind a storage crate, her blade humming to life. Plasma bolts sizzled past their heads, scorching the bulkhead. Whoever ambushed them wasn't here to intimidate. They meant to kill. Monroe returned fire without hesitation. 3 shots, 3 hits. One body slumped forward, armored but unmarked. No insignias, no colors. Mercenaries or extremists. Hired hands. The kind who profit from conflict and panic. Coalition trash. 6 hostiles, Monroe muttered, eyes sharp. 2 flanking left. I see them. Zelnara's voice was ice. She pivoted, blade arcing, and deflected a blast before driving the edge into the nearest attacker. Blood hissed as it hit the floor. The enemy wasn't disciplined. Rush timing, weak cover tactics. But the firepower was real. Someone supplied them well. The weapons were Coalition grade. Someone inside the station was funding sabotage. Monroe ducked low and pulled a secondary weapon from his thigh holster, a compact stunner. He tagged another attacker mid-stride. We need to move. They're pinning us here. Zelnara calculated. Agreed. Corridor 20 meters down connects to maintenance shafts. Monroe nodded. On your 6. They moved in sync. No wasted words. Zelnara hated how natural it felt. Hated that this human wasn't panicking, wasn't retreating. He was adapting. Quickly. Efficiently. In the maintenance shaft, lights flickered. Emergency protocols hadn't triggered, which meant this assault wasn't random. Someone had disabled internal sensors. Monroe tapped his comm static. Jammed. They planned for this, he said. Someone knew we'd be here. Zelnara, clench your jaw. Then they'll regret not bringing more bodies. They navigated the shaft, dropping into another level of Deck 9. The cache they were investigating was only one part of the threat. Now it was clear this was a coordinated attack, not just a trap. A message, possibly the beginning of something larger. Monroe stopped suddenly, scanning a pulse reading. Something's charging. Big power draw close. Zelnara stepped past him and saw it. A shaped bomb, mounted near the atmospheric processors. Not a conventional explosive. High-frequency destabilizer, designed to tear apart structure, not people. It would compromise the entire deck and kill everyone inside, regardless of species. "Help me disarm it," she said. "I'm not trained on Kael'tari tech. It's hybrid, human components too." They worked quickly. Zelnara took the lead, but Monroe caught small wiring patterns she missed. His insight shaved off precious seconds. She didn't thank him. She just worked faster. Then the second wave hit. A shriek. Metal tore open behind them. More attackers. Heavier armor. One tossed a canister. Sonic disruptor. Zelnara pushed Monroe aside and took the brunt of it. Her head screamed. Ears bled. She stayed upright through force of will. Monroe fired through the blinding light. Holding position, his rifle overheated. He threw it aside and drew a combat knife. One enemy lunged for Zelnara while she disabled the final bomb circuit. Monroe stepped into the path without hesitation. The plasma bolt hit him square in the chest. Zelnara blinked. The code panel blurred. She finished the sequence and snapped the last wire. The charge shut down. Then she turned. Monroe was on the floor, blood pooling, gasping, armor cracked, but he was still conscious. She didn't understand. He wasn't ordered to protect her. There was no tactical reason. He didn't even know her. And still, he threw himself into the line of fire. For her. His voice was faint. Couldn't let them win, not like this. Zelnara stared at him. This made no sense. Humans didn't act this way. Not toward Kael'tari. Not after the war. Not after Velker Prime. She holstered her blade and pulled him onto her shoulder. He groaned, barely coherent. "Stay awake," she snapped. He chuckled, coughing. "You're heavier than you look." "Shut up," she growled and started running. The corridors were chaos. Smoke, scattered bodies, flickering lights. Reinforcements clashed with the remaining attackers in the distance. Zelnara pushed forward, dodging crossfire, shielding Monroe with her own body. Medical Bay was 3 decks up. She bypassed the lifts, compromised, climbed instead, his body heavy and bleeding. When she reached the bay, the medic stared, stunned. She barked orders, demanding treatment. They obeyed without question. As they worked on Monroe, Zelnara stood outside the chamber, shaking. Not from exhaustion, from confusion. She'd seen countless humans fight, but not like this. Not without self-preservation. Not without cause. Monroe had no reason to care if she lived or died, yet he acted like he did. A junior officer approached her. Is a human your assigned partner?" She didn't answer. "He protected you," the officer said quietly. "Why?" Zelnara didn't have an answer. She watched the medical display blink, his vitals stabilizing, barely. Her hand brushed against her armor. The blood oath rune still shone faintly under the lights. Kale Thor Venshak. Kill all humans. Never forget. But now, standing outside the operating room of the very species she vowed to destroy, something cracked inside her. She whispered to herself, "Why did you do it?" Not to him, to the universe, to fate, to the code she followed blindly for years. There were no answers, only a silence that felt heavier than any war she'd ever fought. Monroe survived. Barely. 2 ribs shattered, lungs punctured, cardiac rhythm unstable for nearly a full minute. Human medicine alone wouldn't have been enough. Kael'tari nanites were deployed, unauthorized, experimental, and forbidden outside military command. Zelnara didn't ask permission. She injected him with her own reserve supply. The medic protested until she silenced him with a single look. 3 hours later, Monroe woke, groggy, weak, but alive. "You're still here," he mumbled, voice hoarse. She didn't answer. She had sat in that chair, arms crossed, for nearly the entire duration, watching him, waiting, fighting herself. He blinked. "Figured you'd be halfway to the War Council, writing your report." Zelnara stood. "I already filed it. I removed your name from the combat sequence. Said I deactivated the bomb alone." Monroe squinted at her. "Why?" Because if they knew you protected me, someone would start asking questions. You think they'd punish me for saving your life? I think peace is fragile, and people are looking for reasons to break it. She turned away, but Monroe's voice stopped her. Why'd you carry me out? A pause. I needed answers, she said quietly. Couldn't get them from a corpse. He gave a weak smile. Still professional, I see. She didn't smile back. 2 days passed. The attack was blamed on a rogue mercenary group opposing the Coalition's unification doctrine. But Zelnara wasn't satisfied. The weaponry was too advanced. The attack too precise. Someone on the station had given them access. She began investigating. Monroe, recovering slower than expected, requested limited mobility clearance. Against better judgment, Zelnara helped him get it. She needed someone who understood the station's human protocols, security blind spots, and especially its political shadows. They became a quiet unit. Not allies. Not yet, but no longer enemies. One night, reviewing security footage in a sealed lab, Zelnara found a missing link, a shipment log rerouted hours before their mission. The override key was encrypted with a council staff ID, one assigned to a human diplomat named Ferris Kane. Monroe froze when he saw the name. Kane was embedded on my squad during the war. Political analyst. Never saw combat. Yet, he has military-grade clearance. And old connections, Monroe said. His family owns defense contracts. Zelnara leaned in. He sabotaged the station to restart the war. He wants to fracture the Coalition. Monroe nodded grimly. And profit from the collapse. They confronted Kane the next day, not with weapons, with evidence. Alone, Kane didn't deny it. He smiled. You two think peace is real, he said, sipping from a glass like nothing mattered. It's a pause. That's all. The Kale Tari will never forget. Humans will never forgive. Sooner or later, someone was going to light the match. I just made sure it burned the right way. Zelnara stepped forward. You cost innocent lives. They were statistics, Kane said. Calculated losses. Necessary. You try to kill your own, Monroe said, voice sharp. I try to remind our people who the enemy is. Kane stood. But here's the thing. You're not going to report me. Zelnara's blade was at his throat before he finished the sentence. Try me. Kane didn't flinch. Because the moment you do, the station falls apart. News leaks. Accusations fly. The Kale Tari government pulls out. Earth retaliates. The peace dies right here, right now. He was right. That was the worst part. If they expose him, they'd play into the very narrative he built. Martyr him. Divide the fragile alliances again. Monroe stared at Zelnara. There's another way. She turned to him slowly. What? Let him disappear. No justice. No spotlight. He stepped toward Kane. You want to be the face of the next war? Monroe asked. We'll take that from you. Strip you of your voice. Your legacy. No trial. No headlines. Just gone. Kane hesitated. Zelnara understood. Monroe didn't want to feed Kane's myth. He wanted to erase him entirely. No movement. No martyrdom. Just silence. That night, Kane's diplomatic ID was deactivated. His quarters were vacated. A silent escort took him off station. Destination unknown. The Coalition would classify it as voluntary resignation due to health concerns. No one asked questions. In the aftermath, Zelnara found herself pacing the observation deck alone. The stars looked different now. Not brighter. Just quieter. Like the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Monroe joined her later, still limping slightly. Thought you hated this view, he said. I did. What changed? She didn't look at him. You. Silence. Then, after a long pause, she spoke again. You asked me why I carried you out. Yeah. I had a reason. Back then, I just didn't want to say it. Monroe raised an eyebrow. You shattered something in me when you jumped in front of that bolt, she said. Something I built to survive. I wasn't trying to break anything, he said softly. But you did. You proved me wrong. He smiled faintly. Good. Zelnara looked down at the metal plating on her gauntlet. The Blood Oath rune had faded. The nanite she used to save Monroe's life had destabilized the alloy. The old vow no longer glowed. Maybe that was the point. She didn't say another word, just turned and walked away. But for the first time in years, she didn't walk alone. The war didn't restart. Despite Kane's efforts, despite the death toll, despite the chaos he ignited, the fragile coalition treaty held. Because no one knew. Because the story never made it beyond one report. Filed under internal security. Sealed by executive override. Forgotten by design. Monroe returned to duty with restrictions. Zelnara refused promotion. She requested reassignment. One that placed her further from politics and closer to the edge of explored space. 2 months later, the Coalition assigned them both to the same vessel. The Resolute Dawn, a long-range diplomatic frigate tasked with neutral contact missions. Tense assignments. High risk, zero tolerance for failure. Neither of them protested the pairing. The mission felt different now. Not like compromise. Not like sacrifice. Like purpose. On their third deployment, they were dispatched to a frontier world, a neutral system previously outside Coalition jurisdiction. A small colony had reported an aggressive alien presence, unregistered, previously undocumented, highly territorial. First contact protocol was triggered. The Resolute Dawn entered orbit. Scans passive. No immediate threats. The colony below was silent. No distress signal. No welcoming message. They descended alone. Zelnara adjusted her visor as dust blew across the ridge. The sky was dull orange, the terrain jagged and unstable. Signs of conflict littered the ground. Burned structures, collapsed tunnels, equipment stripped of anything valuable. But no bodies. Where is everyone? Monroe asked. She checked thermal. Nothing, not even underground. They moved cautiously, passing scorched stone walls marked with strange glyphs. Not Kael'tari, not human, something older. Alien symbols pulsed with faint bioluminescence, as if aware of their presence. Then they heard it, a low-frequency hum, not mechanical, not electronic, organic, like breathing. A figure emerged from the ruins, tall, slender, armor grown from bone and crystal, not hostile, not immediately. Zelnara raised her hand. We're with the Coalition, peaceful intent. The alien tilted its head. Then another emerged, and another, dozens. Monroe kept his tone calm. We're not here to invade. The lead figure stepped forward and spoke, not in any known tongue, but they understood it. Direct neural projection, a shared thought. You bring the echo of war. You wear two faces, one forged by blood, the other by regret. Zelnara stiffened. Monroe replied gently, We're not what we were. The alien regarded him silently. Then to Zelnara, You carry a broken oath, yet you walk beside the one you once swore to destroy. She nodded. I did. And now? She looked at Monroe. He looked back. I protect what's worth saving, she said. The alien stance relaxed. The humming stopped. The others behind it lowered their arms. Then speak, and we shall listen. They sat with the beings for hours, learning, exchanging, offering. The creatures were not invaders. They were survivors of an ancient purge, hiding in dead systems, avoiding both humans and Kael'tari. They feared contact because they knew only conquest. But Monroe and Zelnara changed that, because they were both broken, and chose to become something stronger from the pieces. On the return flight, neither spoke for a long time. Then Monroe said, You think this alliance will hold? Zelnara stared out the window. If it's built on silence and fear, no. But if it's built on truth, maybe. He nodded. Truth hurts. Yes, she said, but it doesn't kill. When they docked with the Resolute Dawn, a new message awaited them. Their joint report on the alien contact had been flagged by command, by intelligence, and by both governments. Someone wanted the details buried. Monroe sighed. They're scared of the unknown. They always are. The two walked through the ship's dim corridors, debating whether to redact the files, whether to protect what they found, whether to trust a system that once turned them into weapons. In the end, they chose disclosure. Not because they trusted the coalition, but because they believed in each other. The report went through. Unedited, uncoded, unfiltered. Backlash was swift, but something unexpected followed. Support from both human and Kael'tari civilians, from soldiers, from outpost workers who were tired of being told who to hate and why. Monroe and Zelnara became names whispered not in fear, but in respect. Not heroes, not saviors. Proof that enemies could change, that oaths could break for better reasons, that scars didn't have to dictate the next war. Zelnara returned to her quarters one evening, the lighting dim, her armor dusty from another deployment. She looked at the blade on her wall, the one she used to carry with pride. The edge had dulled. She picked it up, ran her hand along the cold metal, then she laid it back down. Monroe was already waiting in the command room, sipping something that passed for coffee. He looked up. "You ever going to stop scaring people?" She smirked. "Not unless they ask nicely." He chuckled. "We got another assignment." "Where to?" "Outer Ring. Deep colony. Mixed population." She raised an eyebrow. "Still putting a Kael'tari and a human on joint missions?" "Apparently we're the best advertisement for peace they've got." She nodded slowly, then turned to go. He called after her. "Hey!" She stopped. "Would you still kill me?" A long silence. "No," she said, "but I might still punch you." He grinned. "I'll take it." They stepped out into the hangar bay. The stars stretched beyond the station's shields, endless and indifferent. But this time, neither feared what lay beyond, because now they carried more than oaths. They carried the proof that enemies didn't have to stay enemies, that sacrifice wasn't weakness, that sometimes one act, one moment of unearned grace, could shatter centuries of hate, and from that shattered past, something stronger could rise. Together, they walked into the void, not as soldier and target, but as partners, and for the first time in generations, hope followed them.